Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Sarah. I'm the chair of Harrogate District Foundation Trust. It is absolutely brilliant to see you in the room, and I'd also like to say a hugely warm welcome for people who are not in the room but are also joining us on this, what seems to be a very chilly evening. So, welcome, everyone. Now, it's really important, I think, to start by saying thank you for making the time to do this, especially at quite a busy time of year. Events like these are really, really important to us. Obviously, it's the opportunity to meet you, to say hello, but also to really share what's been happening, what's been important for us, and the opportunity to hear from you too. Now, in terms of getting to know us a little better, I'd like to very quickly introduce groups of colleagues. So when I say the group of colleagues, I'd like them to give a big wave so you know who they are. So made up in the room tonight, we have our executives. Can you give us a big wave, please? Executives. Brilliant. So if you have questions about what we do, they're the ones to ask. We also have our non-executives in the room as well. Can they give us a big wave too? That's perfect. Some very enthusiastic waving going on there. Thank you very much indeed. Our non-executives and our executives make up our board, which is very important to know in case you want to ask some questions. My next group of people that I would like to introduce are our governors. Now, our governors are our fantastic volunteers who are our eyes and ears for our communities. So we are absolutely delighted to have them in the room too. Can I have a big cheery wave from our governors? Yay! Excellent. And I'm absolutely delighted to welcome HIF colleagues. That acronym is Harrogate Integrated Facilities. I'm not going to steal their thunder because they are going to tell you all about their work, but I think it's really important that you know who our HIF colleagues are. I think you might be a small group this evening, are you? Yes, there are our HIF colleagues. Now, we had a very sophisticated plan, which was to mingle across the tables. So hopefully you are sat near an executive, a governor, probably not too near our two HIF colleagues, but hopefully we are spread out so you get the chance to be able to get to know them and say hello. Now, between us, those four groups, we all work together with absolute sharp focus on making sure our services for patients, service users and their loved ones are as effective as can possibly be. I believe that there isn't a hierarchy within this group. We are all really important. We all have something to offer. And when we all work together and share that focus, we're going to be the most successful. So regardless of your role within any of those groups, we absolutely are committed to making sure that we provide the best care that we possibly can. Now, I think that's why you're in the room, because this is also important to you. So to have that shared opportunity to talk about care is really, really important. Really matters to us. We think it really matters to you. And we think that even though tonight is our annual members meeting, if you're up for this, we would like to do more engagement activity. I think being able to talk to you directly, listen to your feedback, understand more about your experiences, actually just helps us all with that goal of being the most effective that we can possibly be. So if you are up for that, we will tell you more at the end of this session. Now, you should have some agendas on your table. There's quite a lot to get through. I was told not to talk for too long, but we wanted to have the best opportunity to be able to share some of the really important things going on. So your agenda actually will take you through the structure of our session. Now, we have crammed a lot into this, which means we've got a separate time towards the end for your questions. However, when you're listening to the presentations and you think, oh, I really want to ask that, that's what your notepads are for, because we want to make sure that if there's something that you really want to ask, you've got the opportunity to write it down so we remember it. If we get lots and lots and lots of questions at the end, which would be brilliant, and we don't have time to answer them all, then we will follow up and make sure that the answers are published for you as well. So if there are things that you're really interested about, either what we're discussing this evening or other things, then that's your opportunity to be able to bring that to our attention. Now, I've left the really important housekeeping bit until last, which is there are refreshments, hot refreshments, over at the side of the room. If you really need an extra cup of tea, please do get one. Don't feel that this is too formal that you can't get up. There's obviously water on your tables, and that will be refreshed if you need more water too. I think most of you will have found where the toilets are, but they're just back out towards the reception area. And when we are asking questions or talking, and this is a reminder for colleagues as well, because we are being live streamed and recorded, it's really important that we talk slowly and carefully. Have you noticed that I'm doing this? Yeah, colleagues know that I speak really fast, so I'm trying very hard to speak nice and slowly. So that's my introduction. Again, a hugely warm welcome on this chilly December evening, but it is brilliant to have you here, so thank you very much indeed. Before I hand over to my first colleague, the next item on the agenda was about the minutes. We have the minutes from last year. In terms of time, we are going to say if you've got any questions about the minutes, then do come to one of our colleagues at the end of the session. But without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Steve. Steve has stepped into this role to do our Council of Governor update. And because he volunteered for this, the definition of volunteering is quite interesting, but because he volunteered for this, can we give him a nice warm welcome as he comes to the microphone?
Thank you. That's very kind. At this juncture, it's probably worth giving my apology, one apology, because I think it's good to get apologies in right at the beginning. We are covering the 21-22 financial year, because that's what this meeting is for, but I do stray into things that have happened since the start of the current financial year, because it would seem strange to leave some of those things out. So, and I'll endeavour to follow the lead of not speaking too fast, because my wife tells me that I often do. So you'll have noticed that clearly I'm not Claire Illingworth. I'm a public governor, and I represent the Wetherby and Harewood constituency. And I'm very privileged to be presenting this on behalf of our lead governor, Claire Illingworth. Okay. That's good, right. Technology does work. I clearly need to point it in the right direction. My second apology of the evening is to say I'm sorry, some of my slides are quite busy, but I think they're made available, aren't they? So anything I gloss over that you want to see more of, you'll have an opportunity to do that. But the purpose of this slide is just to remind what the trust footprint was in the 21-22 financial year. So the things that you will all know about Harrogate Hospital, Ripon Community Hospital, the outreach clinics that we've got in a number of locations across this geographical area, I'm sure colleagues will say more about the next point. We're actually the largest provider of 0 to 19 children's services in England, and in 21-22 that covered 8 local authorities. We now cover 9 with the addition of Wakefield, but that is strictly in this financial year. And as Sarah's already said, we have the HIF subsidiary. Council of Governors is chaired by Sarah, of the chair of the trust. 15 elected governors in the year, 13 of us being public governors, elected by public members, your good selves, and thank you for that. 1 vacancy at the moment there, and we have currently 2 staff governors who are elected by staff members. We have 3 vacancies there. Currently, we have 6 stakeholder nominated governors. I suspect that's probably a bit small for people to read, but there you have the public constituencies, so Harrogate and surrounding districts, Knaresborough and East, Ripon and West, Wetherby and Harewood, which is, along with a colleague Mike Dunn, that Mike and I represent. You'll notice I've not used the full title because it's the longest one. And we have a representative for the rest of North Yorkshire and York, and we have a number of staff governors and stakeholder governors. Stakeholder governors covering HIF, North Yorkshire County Council, I think that probably should say Harrogate Borough Council, but as one of the others, University of Bradford, and we have a couple of vacant seats there. In the 21-22 year, we had a number of governor elections. You see the results of those, and a number of those colleagues are in the room. We had 2 main election times during that year, and we've had a number of elections in the current financial year as well. The results of those are summarised, and again, a number of us are in the room. I would like to say at this point, one of the main things I'd like to say is a massive thank you and a farewell to some governors who've left us in the period since the 21-22 financial year started, quite through to date. And I know at least one of those is in the room, but I would like to say a major thank you to everybody for the service that you've given us. I won't go through them one by one because that would take some time, but they've done a great job, and we miss them all and the service that they've provided. A little bit of a summary of how the governance of an NHS trust works. We have the Council of Governors as we described, as a mixture of, I've said, elected and appointed members. The elected members are elected by yourselves as public members or by staff members. And our role there is to engage with you as members and feed into the Board of Governors the things that you're concerned about, your views, your opinions about what the trust is doing. The management of the trust is very much the province of the Board of Directors, non-executives and executives, and the non-executives' role in this is to provide assurance back to the governors about how the concerns that you've raised, that we've raised on your behalf, are being addressed by the trust. And Sarah, as chair, chairs the Council of Governors and the board, so it gives us a good connection between the two major functions. Another way of looking at it, we have a range of statutory responsibilities. We look to seek assurance, and we look to engage with you as members of the trust and the wider community. And those two things on the right are the most important things that we do. And there's a graphic there. Some of the ways we do it, we attend board meetings, we attend subcommittees. We've got some of our own committees, which I'll say a bit more in a moment. The governor role, sorry again, quite a busy slide, but I've deliberately put emphasis on the representation of the interests of members and the wider public, and holding non-executive directors to account for the performance of the board, performance of the trust. They're the key things, but you notice there's a number of other things that we do as well. We appoint and could remove, appraise and set the remuneration of the non-executive directors and the chair. We appoint the Trust's external auditor, and I think you'll be hearing from them later this evening. And we get involved in things such as approving or not approving any actions the Trust is taking in respect of any increases to non-NHS income if they exceed 5%, any acquisitions, mergers, major structural changes. In terms of what we've been doing since the last annual members meeting, we have quarterly Council of Governors meetings, we attend the public boards, we attend a number of, well, all the board subcommittees as observers. In 21-22 it was the Resource Committee, Audit Committee, Quality Committee and People and Culture Committee. The Trust has just introduced an Innovations Committee, and there will be board observers on that as well. We're members of the Charitable Funds Committee. We're members of the Remuneration, Nominations and Conduct Committee, and that's where we deal with things such as the appraisal of the chair, non-executive directors, appointment of the chair, and so on. There's a Governor Development and Membership Committee, and actually that's something we'd really like some input on, how we can better engage with you. It's very much a topic we've been looking at that committee. And we have monthly briefings with the executive and non-executives to keep us in touch with what is happening in the Trust and where we can raise any concerns that we've had brought to our attention. Perhaps more specifically, particularly since COVID, we've had to all find new ways of working. So a lot of what we've done has been done remotely on Teams and other systems. We're now, thankfully, as we are today, getting back more to more face-to-face engagement, but I think the remote virtual engagement will continue because it is quite a good way of keeping in touch. We've had regular updates from the executive and the non-executives as the COVID-19 pandemic has progressed. We have, since we last met, approved the appointment of the chair, Sarah, so welcome, Sarah, if that's not a little bit late to be doing that. We've also been involved in approving extensions to non-executive director terms. In the last year, that was Maureen Taylor, and Maureen's not with us today, but she's somebody else I'd very much like to say thank you to for her service, as I would Sarah's predecessor, Angela Schofield. Appraisals, we've been involved, as I've said, in the appointment of a new external auditor that you'll hear from later. We've been consulted on the Trust's quality priorities, and we've had input to the Trust business planning processes and the development of the new strategy, which again you'll hear something more about later. And we have regular training sessions provided by NHS providers, and you'll be thankful to know this is the last slide of my session. But in terms of future plans, clearly the top two priorities remain. We'll continue to represent your interests and members and the general public. We'll continue to ask the board, the non-executive directors, questions and seek assurance from them about the performance of the Trust, again on your behalf. We've recently undertaken a review of the effectiveness of the Council of Governors, and we're working through various things there, one of which is how we can better engage with our members, with the wider public, and that's something I'd particularly like to hear more about from you. We'll be looking at the governor role and our constituencies to make sure we're reflecting the Trust's wider footprint, and we'll be looking into 2023 to resume member events. I don't know if you remember Medicine for Members. Won't be exactly that, but we're looking to resume those in 2023. And again, any views you've got of what you'd find useful would be very welcome. Any immediate questions? I'll take that. I'll take as but please ask anything as the evening progresses, or catch me separately afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve, for that very thorough tour of the governor activity. It really does reinforce the breadth of responsibility that our governors have. So it is really important to have that better understanding. So thank you very much indeed for that. So I'm now delighted to welcome Jonathan, who's ready and prepared to take the microphone. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thanks, Sarah, and hello to everybody. I'm Jonathan. I'm the Chief Exec here at HDFT, and lovely to see you all. And it's really odd in this kind of the new world that we're now in that I have got no idea how many people are watching this. I can see the people in the room, but obviously there'll be people behind cameras somewhere as well watching our annual members meeting. So brilliant for you to be here, and just to welcome you like Sarah did on a quite a dark, horrible night in early December, to take your time to come to hear what we've got to say, which is great. So thank you. So like Steve, clearly the timing of the annual members meeting means that we are officially supposed to be talking about a previous year, but there's so much gone on since then that I will absolutely make no apologies and stray right up to the current day in terms of what's happening at the moment in terms of an overview. And when we say an overview of our trust, HDFT, what do we mean by HDFT? And just to show we're completely joined up, the map there that Steve presented is just there again, just to remind people of the kind of uniqueness of the organisation, really, with the local services around Harrogate, the community services both in Harrogate and wider in terms of North Yorkshire, but also our huge 0 to 19 footprint from Wakefield now up to Northumberland. And during the year, we welcome both of those two, Wakefield and Northumberland, into the trust, which is fantastic. And also just to pick out a few of the facts there about what HDFT does. We've supported over 500,000 children through our local authority work that we do. We're the largest employer in the local area. We have 5,000 plus colleagues that work for us. 55,000 people plus turn up at our emergency department each year, and those are quite normal for people working, like myself, obviously work in the organisation. And sometimes in the NHS we describe ourselves as a small organisation, but actually when you think about it, we are a pretty large organisation with a huge impact and a huge responsibility as well. So how are we getting on, and what have we been doing over the last year up to almost the present day, really? I don't think you can have a conversation about where the NHS is at the moment without reflecting the context of the last couple of years and the impact of the COVID pandemic. It's made a huge difference to how health and care is provided all across the country, all across the world. Crucially, we've seen vaccine developments from something that was in somebody's, an idea almost a couple of years ago to actually now being quite routine and provided by the NHS. We've got, though, the creation of backlogs in care as well, as we've got a huge increase in our waiting times and access. We've got change in working patterns for people now who have reassessed their life and how they want to live, but also the benefits of technology to allow people to work in very different ways. We've got different ways in which healthcare is provided to people as a result of what's been developed over the last couple of years. And it affects everyone in our communities, in our hospitals, and in how we organise a hospital as well. So I don't think we should lose that context. some of the slides now I will go through. You don't need to know the detail of what's in them, but and we will share them. It's just to show you a bit of what's happened in terms of some of the services that we provide. So, you know, if you look at a graph that shows elective care, it almost doesn't matter what the service is. It's planned care. You can see over the last 2 or 3 years, it was running at a level. It plunged during COVID. So the COVID year, nothing happened. The COVID few months, absolutely nothing happened. And it's now back to where it kind of was just about in terms of pre-pandemic. So we're just about now getting back to the levels of work that we did for planned care in terms of pre-COVID. And the important thing about that really is what that's done in terms of how long people are waiting. So again, you don't need to know all of the details, but the top one there is the numbers of people on our waiting list has grown. We now have around 25,000 people on our waiting list. Before COVID, we had about 18,000 people on our waiting list. So a huge change, as a reflection of the pandemic. But we're also, more importantly, it's not the numbers of people waiting, it's how long you wait. Because clearly, if all of those 25,000 people waited 2 months, that would be absolutely fine. The problem is we've got a number of people that have waited a long time. So we are taking positive action to reduce particularly the numbers of people that have waited a long time. So we now have, thankfully, nobody waiting longer than 2 years, which wasn't the case last year. We will have soon nobody waiting over 18 months, and then by the end of next year, nobody waiting over 52 weeks, over 1 year for treatment. That's not the standard that obviously that we aspire to, but that is very positive compared to other parts of the NHS, and it's part of the NHS's way of trying to get back to a service where people are seen and treated within 4 months, which was the original standard. So that was kind of our planned care and the backlog of care there. We've then got urgent care, and again, don't need to see the graphs particularly, but what you'll see in the top graph, similar to planned care, the amount of work we did plummeted during the COVID period and has now got back up to what it was. So in terms of our emergency care, so this is people turning up at the emergency department, people coming in as an emergency, we're now seeing about the same levels as we saw before. The bottom graph is more important because that's the kind of barometer for how the whole of the healthcare system is working at the moment, and that's the amount of time that people are basically in our A&E department and how quickly we see treat and discharge them from that department. And the standard was always, we always hit over 90% of people seen and treated within 4 hours. That's now deteriorated to about 65%. So the waiting time in the emergency department has gone up. So what I would ask, why is that an issue, I suppose? What I would ask if I was you would be, if there's no more people turning up, why are people waiting longer in our emergency department? There's no reason for that, is there? Well, I think the key comes to how long people are now in hospital. And again, don't worry about the detail there, but what you can see is increasing graphs of how long people are in hospital, either over 7 days or over 21 days as well. And that's the kind of problem again across the country in terms of our urgent care performance. People are staying longer in hospital because of the reduction in capacity out of hospital, and we know that that's not something that's great for patients. The longer people are in hospital, the care and how they are often deteriorates. So we're spending a lot of time now trying to create some capacity out of hospital to enable people to be discharged. It's the biggest challenge we've got. It's the biggest challenge that we've got as a country, I think, and it's a real focus for us working with our local authority colleagues around the social care capacity as well. Just in terms of and that's gone worryingly blank on my screen, not sure what's happened there. I'll go back because that's not the one I wanted. Anything there to be seen? We have no signal. That's fine. I will talk, and I'm always good at that. So, just in terms of the next slide would have been looking at our performance of our children's services, our 0 to 19 children's services, in terms of how well they are doing, which is the other key strand of services that we provide. And largely a very green picture, which is fantastic. So we have continued to provide the mandated contacts for our 0 to 19 services over the last few months and years. And the real pressure within our children's community services is around safeguarding. And again, partly as a result of COVID, but also cost of living and other things and isolation, the safeguarding demand in some areas of the country which we provide services for has more than doubled in demand. So it's kind of the community critical care element of our services, and that has seen a huge amount of pressure going forward. So it's been a tricky couple of years, I suppose, and even now, there's that one, so I'll move on to, no. There's been a tricky couple of years in terms of how we've provided healthcare, and getting the message right is really, really important, because we've done some really good stuff, and we are a really good organisation, and we do some really positive things, and none of what I've said is a negative. You know, COVID, backlogs in care, capacity outside of hospital, they're challenges that we know we need to deal with, and we'll continue to deal with in a really positive way. And the strength of us as an organisation is absolutely how we deal with that. So, for example, despite COVID and despite all the difficulties, I will absolutely finish on a number of positives that for us as an organisation. We will hear from HIF colleagues a bit later on, but last year was the biggest ever year in terms of capital investment in the Trust. So creating greener, better facilities for patients and staff. We know that staff's health and well-being is determined by how many of them there are and what environment they work in, and we've spent a lot of time creating a better environment for our staff to work in and for our patients to receive care in. So a real positive in terms of what we managed to do last year. In terms of the people who support HDFT. So again, I could have picked many people here, but our communities that support the organisation that's HDFT, I've picked a selection. We've got the local football team, we've got the Harrogate Scrubbers, we've even got Gardeners World there making a contribution. So again, I think that just shows how people support the NHS and support HDFT in particular over difficult times. We've got our charity, and again, I could have picked numerous photographs and numerous things that have gone on, and it's not just about raising money. That's clearly an element to support the NHS in terms of that. It's about being part of the local community and engaging with people in local communities. And if I remember the support last Christmas, when we the charity pulled together over 1,000 packages to go to children in our geographic patch for Christmas who might have been struggling to have a decent Christmas, is something that will certainly live long in my memory here at HDFT. And finally, our colleagues, who are just wonderful, never cease to amaze me and impress me with what they do each and every day. And again, I could have picked many photographs here, from Teams of the Month to Making a Difference Awards to our Team of the Year, our Kite Awards, a whole host of things that just reflect how wonderful that the colleagues are that work at HDFT. Everywhere you go, from kind of Wakefield to Northumberland, from Skipton to Scarborough, Harrogate to Ripon, in hospital, out of hospital, people are part of HDFT, really proud to be part of HDFT, and just make a difference to loads and loads of people each and every day. So to all of them, I just want to say a big thank you. And I will now hand over to Jordan, and I will pick up any questions or comments at the end. So thank you very much.
Hi everyone. So I'm Jordan Mackay, Acting Director of Finance, and I'm going to talk to you a bit about our annual accounts for 21-22 and our future plans. And as others have said, I will drift into what's happening now and also drift a bit further forward, but I'll start with going way back to the last annual members meeting, which Jonathan was enjoying Sonia Climbs for, and I had to deputise for him then. So I'm hopefully a familiar face in this regard. This was the last slide that I presented at the last of what we were worrying about for 21-22, what was going to be happening in the sort of year ahead. Jonathan's touched on the massive capital investment that we were putting in place, 32 million of plans. We were looking at how we're going to recover from COVID, the costs of COVID that were continuing. We had the elective recovery challenge that was ahead. We still had those waiting times that Jonathan mentioned back there in terms of what was presented before on those graphs. We'd, in terms of productivity and efficiency, we were still spending money well during COVID, but the problem was very different. So we had lots of different challenges during that time, and it was getting back into that bit about being productive, how do we get our next efficiencies, and spending taxpayer money well in the context that we had at that time. We had a revised finance regime. We'd been in pretty much block contracts, given money to sort of cope with the COVID pandemic. What were we going to do next? And this is what we did. So we lived within our resources for 21-22. We've just had governors before this, council governors before this, talked a bit about what the year looked like. We spent over £300 million, as it says in the sort of packs that have been spread out there this evening. If you read our accounts, you will see that we had a £9.3 million surplus. Now that sounds huge. Actually, part of that was the funding that goes with all of those capital works, the SALIC stuff, the really good stuff on the environment. And if you take that out, which is the big adjustment, you see a £69,000 surplus. And what that tells you is we were given £300+ million to provide care across Harrogate, across the North East, as the maps have sort of suggested. And we did that really well. We deployed that money and used it and lived within those means. We had the significant capital investment. We fell just short of 32 million. It was just about 30 million. But we spent that on all sorts of things. So there's the £13 million worth of works that support the environment, the borehole picture that you were next to there, Sarah, and everything else that sort of goes with that. There is now solar panels on the roof of the hospital. There are plant rooms that have been built that will be put on the hospital, hence why we've got a crane out the front of it. So lots of stuff that was going on in that respect. We spent £5.3 million on ageing equipment to replace equipment across the trust to make sure that colleagues had the right equipment to be going about their jobs. That ranged from very, very small items like scales in the community services through to some larger equipment like our CT scanner. And we spent £6.6 million on IT equipment. And that was a whole host of things, ranging from replacing laptops and desktops that are old. We have far more laptops to cope with the amount of people who are working at home now and new ways of working, right the way through to kit that supports people like our radiologists to be able to read scans at home and do various bits of their job more flexibly, which is really, really positive. We continued to have a significant amount of COVID expenditure. We spent about £10 million responding to the COVID pandemic directly last year, so that fed through in our accounts. And we supported elective recovery, and the graphs sort of speak for themselves in terms of things. I remember back to last October, there were about 300 patients who were at that risk of being over 2 years, and we put all sorts of things in place to make sure that we brought that down. We offered support to other organisations, and we had a handful of patients at the end of the year, more for the reasons of that was the right thing to do for that group of patients than it was a sort of failure to be able to fit people in on time. And we've restarted some work on productivity and efficiency. We found about £4 million worth of efficiencies, of savings across the board. That was relatively modest for us, but that was the beginnings of some stuff. And I'll come back to productivity and efficiency in a bit. In terms of, that's me telling you that that's what we did and it was good. We've just heard at the Council of Governors, unfortunately we'll not hear from them again, Steve, the external auditors. They gave us a clean opinion, so that's what that means. Their true and fair view of our financial performance and position, and they also describe positive sort of side of things in terms of value for money. So that tells you guys that what I'm saying to you is true, that there is an element that sort of feeds through on that. So the future, well, I'll stray a bit into the year that we're in, so 22-23, because typically we do this a bit earlier in the year. So we've got a little bit of where have we got to so far. There is a bit of, we're suffering like many people are, with a lot of inflationary pressures, a lot of inflationary issues that are feeding through. That's causing pressures on our bottom line, hence why on this nice sheet here, there's living within our resources with a question mark. We're doing a few things to sort of non-recurrently make sure that we work our way through this financial year, but there are pressures in the system. The great stuff that I talked about in terms of the environment, that is reducing our need for energy. We've used 25% less kilowatt hours in terms of gas and electricity over the last in this financial year than we did the previous one. That's costing 125% more than it did the previous year. So there's pressures that, you know, if you go back to your own household bills, that's what we're sort of seeing in that respect. But we're managing some of that, and we're managing some other things that are going on. And when I was thinking about this, I was trying to think about how could I put some context around it. I looked to, you've got the trust values there, hence why the kite's there. It's not just there to be on brand. And I was thinking about what people are dealing with this year that we've sort of put in place. So first thing on this kindness, we've got about what we're doing, to my mind, what we're doing around the cost of living. There's a whole host of things in terms of cost of living that we've put in place to support our colleagues to be worrying about one less thing, I suppose. Doesn't take away the whole worry, but there's a whole host of things that have been done, from hardship grants, 480 colleagues who are supported, through to giving access to something that provides discounts in terms of discount cards. There is 10p a mile that we're offering on top of the mileage rates for people who are travelling across that massive geography that Jonathan talked about before. We're a living wage employer. That funding sort of flowed through. Why am I listing all these things out? Well, these are different, I suppose, to what a lot of other organisations are doing, and it's quite it's a thing that other organisations are coming to ask us about. But it's also quite brave because it's not the sort of prevailing thing that's happening across the NHS, across NHS organisations. We're putting something in there to help people deal with some of the issues that they've had. We've also been addressing some specific issues for colleagues, being able to put a staff shop in place, which is essentially discounted. It allows people to be able to have a reduced sort of bill in terms of their food and other things that sort of come through. There's a bit then integrity sort of next on some of this. And for me, when I was thinking about this, is a bit of, for this financial year, putting our money where the issues are. Jonathan's mentioned safeguarding already. We put some funds into safeguarding this year to make sure that we're making that service robust. We've got some risks that sort of flow through from health and safety. We put infrastructure in place to cover some of those things off. Our emergency department to support that waiting time stuff that's going on. Hundreds of thousands of pounds going into our emergency department to help with flow through that department, help make it a safe place as well. And the elective recovery element of stuff that sort of flows through. Not forgetting some of our community services, what we're sort of doing around the sort of Arches model, the community discharging model and everything else that kind of comes through that. A bit about money, putting money where my mouth is around some of this, where it matters, sorry. Teamwork's the next one. So we've got, as well as the stuff that I mentioned in terms of cost of living, Jonathan mentioned good places to work. There's a wellbeing fund. It's improving the environment in the hospital. If you walk through the hospital, you'll have seen lots more painting work that's going on. That doesn't just in the sort of front areas stuff. It goes into people's areas, people's offices. Really positive in that respect. We've brought on board new services to be part of the wider team. If those who've got a keen eye will have seen that Jonathan's map was slightly bigger than Steve's map. It wasn't a competition. But there's the Wakefield services that have come on board to expand that footprint that we've got. And we're also making HDFT a better place to work. So you can see that in terms of how do I evidence that. We've already referred to our sort of theatres team. They've grown rather than relying on banking agency was really positive. They all sound like really good things for this year that we've put in place to try to help manage things. We're living within those resources by some non-recurrent stuff, but I still think there's work to do, and that's where I get to equality. There's still areas where we know that we could bring that standard up that sort of comes to mind. So talk a bit about getting right ahead of myself here. The future now, that might be quite hard to see. So we've got a slightly uglier graph. This doesn't look like a circle, does it? It's more like a pumpkin. Anyhow, we've got a big capital investment for next year, put to be confirmed. We're currently waiting for some confirmation of our electronic patient record. That'll be revolutionary for our organisation over not just next year, but the next few years, which will be really positive. There's going to be such a focus on productivity and efficiency. We've got lots of guidance coming through from a national perspective around, if you listen to colleagues from Department of Health in terms of Stephen Bartley and others, 8% more doctors, 8% more nurses. Let's get the productivity back up in terms of what we're doing. There's clearly a massive story that's underneath all of that, but it's quite clearly going to be a focus for the next year ahead. We're putting lots of things in place to try and meet some of that challenge around some of those things. We've got on there a little bit about the economic pressures, the wider inflationary stuff I've already mentioned. We'll see other things going up next year. We're probably looking at our exit run rates of spending about £30,000–40,000 a day more than we can afford, more than that overall resources that we've got. So we've clearly got a challenge around that. £30,000 to £40,000 a day sounds like a lot. How do you kind of put that in terms of context? In terms of day-to-day spend, you know, you're talking about, well, depending where you get your figure, around 360 nurses, 370 nurses, that kind of figure of stuff. It's our total spend on anaesthetists and orthopods, just as a kind of a reflection on stuff. It's half of the hospital's wards, so it's big sums of money. But to give a bit of sort of context to it, if we reduce our agency spend back down to where it was in 1920, our spend on real premium people where we've got vacancies, if we can bring that down to 1920, which should be something we should aspire to do, we're halfway there, which makes this a bit more doable. If we look at our non-pay, a 2.5% reduction, that shaves another 5,000 off a day. There's lots of stuff that we can do around some of this, and we just need to make sure we're engaging the right people around it. I had a couple of other things up on there that were around the elective recovery challenges moving forward. I think Jonathan's already captured some of that, and a bit about how we sort of fully develop the things around urgency and emergency care. And I was thinking about how I sort of wrap some of this up. So there's a little bit of kind of looking to that future year of how do we make sure that we're spending money well, that we're using your taxpayer money well overall, but also providing really good value to patients across the board and families and carers and everything else. And I think I was sort of left with a conversation I had with my daughter at the weekend, which she sort of turned to, we were asking her, what does people do? So I said, what does Daddy do? And my wife turned around and says, Daddy counts money, doesn't he? And I was like, oh, that's a bit, don't want to be known for that. And then my daughter said, Daddy helps people spend money. And that sounds better, doesn't it? And I think probably is where we need to get as an organisation, is making sure that we're spending money well, getting that overall taxpayer money being spent well and everything else that goes with it. I think I'm now handing over to Mark and Angie. Back to you. Oh, right. I've got that totally wrong, haven't I? Never mind. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Hi, hello again. I'm now kind of nervously looking at myself, which is a little bit disconcerting. So here we go. Cheers. Thanks, everybody. For those that might just be joining in terms of the YouTube channel, I'm Jonathan, I'm the Chief Executive, and what I'm going to do is introduce a bit of the section now around developing the trust strategy, which has been a really important and significant piece of work that we've done over the last year as well. And I will start, and then I'll hand over to Jackie, Medical Director, who will introduce herself. And as Sarah said, any questions about anything we say, jot them down on your pads, and we will pick them all up as a collective. So last time I was stood here about 15-20 minutes ago, it was very much about what have we done in the past and up to today, and what's the current position today. Clearly this work around how we develop our strategy and our plans is very much about what's the future look like for the organisation. And again, I've deliberately repeated that, not just to ingrain those things into you, but really important that this is a strategy for 22 onwards, and we are a fairly unique organisation within the NHS, as you can see from the map and from the kind of numbers there in terms of the services that we have, from the very local services to the services in Northumberland and Wakefield. And I think before I kind of go through how we've gone about developing the new strategy and what it includes, it's probably worth just reflecting on the journey to get here, because I think that's really important context for why we are where we are now. I mean, you may be thinking, how are we looking like that map? How are we providing all of these services? So I think it is worth just going back, because over the last 15 or so years, HGFT has developed significantly and has always anticipated and responded to changes in healthcare. 15 years ago, we were a district general hospital providing services to the Harrogate population. That was our job. We did it well, but that was our remit. And at that point, we then thought we would need to expand some of our services into the North Leeds population, so providing district general hospital services still, but to patients that resided in the North Leeds area for a number of reasons. One, we thought our services were good enough to make that offer, but most importantly, to make sure that we were clinically sustainable, so we had enough catchment population to make sure we could employ enough people to provide those services robustly with all of the right rotas that were required for clinical services, but also financial sustainability as well, and spreading the overheads over a greater number of services that we could provide. So we did that about 15 years ago, and the legacy of that is still with us now in a very positive way in terms of the work that we look to do with colleagues in West Yorkshire. About 10 years ago, we then took on the adult community services locally, so the district nurses service here, the Ripon Community Hospital, and we also took on some of the more specialist community services across a wider catchment of North Yorkshire, so the kind of podiatry services, community dental services. So they kind of came on board about 10 years ago, really, and also for the first time at that point we took on the 0 to 19 services for North Yorkshire. That was our kind of first foray into public health work, and again, the consequence of that is being felt positively today. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, that 0 to 19 service expanded significantly to cover the geography that is there on the map as well. So we moved very much away from just being an organisation that looked to kind of correct poor health in a way, to fix people where something had gone wrong and respond to ill health. We became an organisation that was also around promoting really good health and health promotion in a very positive way. And through a whole of that period of time, up to the current day, we've continued to work collaboratively with our colleagues in West Yorkshire and North Yorkshire in terms of our secondary care, what we would call our district general hospital services, again, to provide really good care with our partners. And I think sometimes we take that for granted, that journey for granted, how well we collaborate with people, how we work in many different ways and with different people all of the time, local authorities, other NHS trusts. It is kind of ingrained in our psyche, and whilst arguably collaboration across the NHS and care services is now seen as the right thing to do, I think we've been practicing it for a long time now, which is great, and it's kind of ingrained in the organisation. So we developed our latest strategy then based on that journey, building on the collaboration and the service history that we had. And we engaged with a number of people. We had a public survey which went out to members and like yourselves, governors, Health Watch. We had a staff survey as well with over 500 responses. We had workshops for people. We had 40 bespoke interviews with key partners as well. And the kind of number of themes then came out of all of that engagement with people, which we then kind of coalesced around a kind of clear purpose and also a series of ambitions, which I'll quickly go through now. So again, this is part of the handouts that you may have picked up on your way in. The clarity of purpose around actually we're here to improve the health of our patients, our children and our communities. That's our job, that's our job card, that's what we're here to do, and that's what we always aspire to do. And within that, some really clear ambitions as well, to provide really high quality safe care, to work with our partners to provide really good urgent care and planned care as well, which we've talked about earlier, to provide a really great start in life for children, obviously, and to be a really great place to work, because we know that health and care services are services provided to people by people. So being a really good place to work with really positive people is such a key thing for us. And then all of that will be supported, as again we've talked a little bit about, supported by having an environment to deliver really well, having the digital infrastructure to support that, and also having a culture of research and innovation, both in itself in terms of doing research to push healthcare on and push services on, but also a mindset of continuous improvement, so that we're always looking to see what can we do better, how can we do this a bit better for the patients and the population and the children that we serve. So, I mean, in a moment or two, I'll hand over to Jackie, who will talk a bit more in some of the detail and some of the other things that we've developed through our trust strategy. But I just wanted to speak for a couple of minutes around the how we provide services, not just what we provide. So the strategy is a lot about what are we going to provide in the future and what do we look to provide in the future. In and amongst there are ingrained through all of this are the values, which is how we do it. And the values here in HDFT are really important, and actually they're much more important than the what we do, because the how we do will determine whether that's successful. And if that's successful for HDFT, it's clearly successful for the patients and the population that we serve as well. So we have our KITE values. We've developed over 18 months now of being kind, of having integrity and high standards, working well together in teams and treating people fairly and equally as well. And they're really important. And I make no apology myself personally for focusing on the K. I mean, that is the most important one for me, the kindness. And if there was a clinical trial that would assess how impactful is kindness on patient outcomes, we would prescribe it, because it makes such a difference to the outcomes of patients and of staff if people are kind to each other. So make no apology for focusing on that. And it's this culture, along with our kind of clarity. I think we've got great clarity as an organisation of our place in the local and regional service provision space that will lead to our success, which, as I've said before, our success, we're not in it for ourselves, it's not success for HDFT per se, it's recognition that actually if we can be successful, it will be successful for the patients, communities and children that we serve. So at that point, I will hand over to Jackie. I hope I've gone through the right requisite number of slides, Jackie. I'll leave you with the device and I'll leave you to the next bit.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, and I shall just click on to check. We are. So, good evening, everybody. My name is Jackie Andrews. I'm the Medical Director of the Trust, and I also lead our digital programmes on behalf of the Board of Directors. So, Jonathan has covered very eloquently how we came to have our new trust strategy. And I just want to spend a few minutes talking a bit about very hot off the press new clinical services strategy. But before I do that, just to expand a little bit, of course you won't be able to see this, but you will be getting the pack. We're often told you're very, very busy. How do you do everything? How do you prioritize everything? And it is a constant challenge. And it's really just to assure you that we use the guiding principles of our trust strategy and all the information that we gather through our trust board committees to do prioritization. And the 7 boxes across the top are our 7 ambitions for our trust strategy. And you'll see that there are a number, but not too many boxes underneath there that we prioritize for this year to say what are the things that we're going to do. There's always competing space, but we have to ensure that we're using our time wisely. The ones down the left-hand side are our quality programme called Caring at Our Best. And we set a number of quality priorities every year, which are scrutinised by our quality committee. So just to give you an example, one of those quality priorities are around our theatre improvement programme. We've had some challenges in our theatre environment. Like many other trusts, after COVID, we saw quite a large turnover of our staff, which led to staff who were not used to working together having to retrain. And we've done a huge amount of improvement work with the theatre team, and they've shown enormous steps forward around their culture and their leadership. So much so that at our recent Trust Awards in the last few weeks, they've won Team of the Year. So again, that shows that we can put in improvements and staff feel that they're able to make those changes. Moving on to our clinical services strategy, we have been wanting to do this for a while. Clearly, we've been somewhat occupied over the last few years with COVID, and it's been all hands to deck. But with the advent now of our agreed trust strategy, it was the right time to start thinking about what clinical services do we want to provide as a trust. And Jonathan has talked through the work that we did to create the trust strategy. And just to confirm, we did the same for our clinical services strategy. So lots and lots of stakeholder engagement, both internally and externally. Primary care colleagues, obviously crucial to our working, social care, the voluntary sector. Lots of workshops were had with our colleagues to say, what services should we be providing? Not just what we, the execs, or the medical consultants should think, but our external partners as well. And again, you won't be able to see it, but just again to confirm that we've talked about what we call fixed points, things that we think they're absolute givens that we should do at HDFT. And number 1 is, of course, to be a high-quality district general hospital. We want to be the district general hospital that people say, if you want to see a good DGH hospital, go to Harrogate. And I think we are, and we want to continue to be that place. District general hospitals were set up in the 1960s around a footprint of about 150 to 200,000 population to provide a range of non-specialist services linked into other centres. And it's still a very good model in the NHS that works well. So we will be doing that, and we will be doing all our services that we have, such as an emergency department, a medical-led maternity unit. And our stakeholders are very supportive of us doing that. There's no threats on the horizon that we can see at the moment in time. Other things that we said we absolutely will do, clearly we need to fit our services to our population. You'll know that we probably have a slightly older population in Harrogate and District than other district general hospitals. We have already been expanding many of our services, particularly our frailty model, but we need to do more work on that. And finally, as Jonathan has nicely outlined to those of us who've not been in the trust as long as Jonathan, there has been a sort of a direction of travel over the last 10, 15 years to become this fantastic provider of children's public health services, the largest in England. We feel it's a real jewel in our crown, and it's something we're really keen to do, but also seek the advantages of doing it. So we provide a great service, and with doing that, we cover a large geographic footprint, we have lots of staff, we collect lots of data. And wouldn't it be great to use that data to drive further improvements, not just for our children's public health services, but across the nation, or perhaps even internationally, because we are such a big provider of it. So that's a real critical thing of our clinical services strategy. We have to, of course, talk a little bit about some challenges, and I don't think there would be any doctor in the NHS or any other colleague in the NHS that wouldn't stand up and say our number one challenge is workforce. So that features very, very highly on our clinical services strategy of how can we continue to recruit and retain the best possible clinicians in the NHS. Again, we do that pretty well at HDFT. We have got many fewer gaps than many other organisations, but we want to continue to be a really good provider of care, which means we need to attract the best clinicians. And that will require us to work differently, as Jonathan alluded to. People want different kind of job plans. They want more flexible working. We're going to have to adapt and adapt fairly quickly to that. Opportunities, again, as people have alluded to in the conversations, it's a really exciting time for the Trust, particularly for the clinical body. We haven't got great digital services at the moment, and we've been lobbying very, very hard centrally to get investment so that we can have a state-of-the-art electronic patient record. And I'm really excited to say that we now have that. And we are going to be allocated a significant sum of money to have an electronic patient record. So we will move hopefully fairly quickly and to be one of the behind the curve to being front of the curve. And with that brings all sorts of opportunities, much better integration, not just for clinicians working in the organisation, but of course patients and citizens, and that sort of holy grail of being able to pull out your phone, have your healthcare records, being able to see what's happening in your GP, in your hospital, in social care, all in one place. So we are moving ever closer to that. When that happens, that will be a big piece of work. We're not calling it a digital project. It's very much a quality improvement project. So watch the space over the next year or two for lots and lots of work to be going on in digital. It's not just about the electronic patient record. There's many other digital programs that are running. And again, it's back to that prioritization, making sure that we're working with our partners across our systems to make sure that we're all doing the same thing at the same time, using the same kit, technology, software, etc., so that we don't end up with lots and lots of different pockets, which is often how it springs up at the start of things. So I think that's all I was going to say. So just a conclusion to bring it round to where Jonathan started. We have now set our ambitions and our strategy, which is all about providing the best possible care, the safest care to our patients, our families, our citizens. The only way we can do that is by supporting our people. The NHS is absolutely a people business. So we have that twin track of clearly wanting to be the best at providing care, but the only way we're going to do that is invest in our people, making sure that people feel valued, making sure they have opportunities to develop their career so that they stay with HDFT, stay within the NHS, and we've got a whole piece of work around that setting off too. So Jonathan, I think that was all I was planning to say, if that's okay, but again, very happy to take questions.
Thank you ever so much for that. We are now ready for the last part of our agenda in terms of input. So I am absolutely delighted to welcome our Harrogate Integrated Facilities colleagues, who I can see coming up to the microphone. So over to you, Mark.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sarah. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Chamberlain, and I'm Chair of Harrogate Integrated Facilities Limited. And I'm delighted to be Chair of Harrogate Integrated Facilities Limited, as I think I probably said to you last time, and that remains the case. And the other thing that remains the case, that we'll come back to a little bit later on, is that when I last spoke to you, I said that our absolute priority was the people in our organisation, and we'll talk a bit more about that, because that is still absolutely our priority. Now, you're getting a double act tonight. So I'm going to speak for a few minutes, and then I will hand over to our Managing Director, Angie. And we're going to give you a little bit of an update about where we are. But one of the things that people often ask me is what is HIF? Who are we? What do we do? So we're going to do, or I'm going to do, a quick bit about that. So, what we are is we are a small, wholly owned company. We were established in 2017, so we've been going for, 5 years? Operational from 2018, and we employ 386 staff, which doesn't sound like a massive number, but it's kind of big enough. And we turn over about £20 million a year. And one of the things that's nice about HIF is you can kind of put your arms around it and know people and talk to people and get a feel for what's really going on, which is great. The other thing that's interesting about HIF, and Harrogate Integrated Facilities gets abbreviated to HIF all the time, I probably should have said that, but that's what I'm talking about, is that we've got the flexibility in the way we're set up that we can look at customers who might sit outside of the normal trust footprint if we think that's the right thing to do, if the trust thinks that's the right thing to do. But we're wholly owned by HDFT, by the trust, who are also our major customer. So we've got a very, very, very close working relationship, and I think it's a really important thing to mention that. And it works really well. It works very well. So what else are we? Well, we provide a range of services principally around the Harrogate Hospital site. And that is estate management, so that's making sure the building is operating correctly, everything works, is in a good state of repair, which is sometimes a bit of a challenge. Facilities management, which covers all the domestic services, the catering, the portering, so getting patients where they need to be, again making sure maintenance is carried out, making sure that everything is clean, that's really important, we'll come back to that in a minute. And that kind of links to the next bit, which is sterile services, which is not immediately obvious to a lot of people what that is, but it essentially is a part of the hospital's site, which we run, which takes all the instruments out of theatre, including endoscopes, and it cleans them and sterilises them and maintains them and makes sure they're ready to be used next time they're needed, which tends to be pretty quickly, to be honest, so it's quite a quick turnaround area. That's sterile services. The medical equipment library, that is where we keep a supply of often used equipment like syringe drivers and things like that, which can be used around the hospital and also out in the community, so that they're always available and they work and they're there when they're needed. Again, it's important stuff. We also run the general office, so those of you who have been into the hospital will have seen the front office. That's part of us. We run hotel services, which includes all the ladies that sort out all of our linen. Again, we'll come back to the domestic staff. They're really important because we focus on things like infection control in the hospital environment, and having a clean site, clean wards is so important. Those people play a massively important role. Okay, so final slide about who we are. I thought it might be useful to just give a little picture of how much stuff we do, and this is actually 21-22, and probably the biggest difference from 21-22 to this year would be that COVID meant we got less visitors, and that meant that we do run the staff restaurant, although it doesn't specifically say it on there, the staff and patient restaurant, which you may have visited yourselves. Obviously that didn't run in quite the same way, but nonetheless 77,000 patient meals were all made in our kitchen on site using predominantly local ingredients, which we're very proud of. We carried out 8,886 deep cleans. A shame we couldn't do 2 more because that would have been a really good number, but anyway. And this again is about the infection control. It's about going into ward environments and cleaning the hell out of them, basically, so that we actually make a major contribution to that infection control agenda. A total of 158,639 surgical instruments were cleaned, and that included 13,304 endoscopes, which, as you can imagine, is quite a big thing to clean, and not just like cleaning a scalpel. It's a lot more complicated. They all come through us. And finally, our porters transported 29,368 patients around the hospital. And we are absolutely clear that our porters are really important people, because not only do they get patients where they need to be, but very often they're the people that talk to patients and carers who are not the doctor and the nurse, but they're someone they can have a chat with, and we understand that's an important relationship, and they play a very, very important role for us. Okay, so that's who we are. So I'm going to hand over to Angie at this point, who's going to tell you some of the great things we've been doing.
Hello everybody, I'm Angie, and as Mark says, I'm the Managing Director for HIF. So what I'd like to talk a little bit about is some of the achievements that we've taken forward this year. And last year it's a bit of a combined affair like everybody else on the panel tonight, and talk a little bit about some of the challenges we've And as Mark says, whether that's through processing instruments through SSD, or the porters taking patients to wards and departments, or welcoming visitors into our new refurbished restaurant, or patient meals, all of them have a role to play. Our waste team, I could go on. So, you know, it's really important that we see them as that collective team HDFT. We have a number of new faces within HIF since we last spoke. We've welcomed Andy Colwell, our new Deputy Estates and Facilities Director, Damien Quinn, our Head of Facilities, and as of next week, Dean Jackson-Smith, who is joining us as our Head of Estates and Facilities. We've also welcomed some new staff across all areas within the Trust, and I'm pleased to say we actually have a four-legged friend who is Ivan. He's a medication detection dog who supports one of our workers within the grounds and gardens team. So if you see him, say hello. He's definitely part of HIF, so we're really pleased to have him on board as well. Workforce, as you can appreciate, is a key priority for us, as Jackie's alluded to. It's a major challenge. We've been doing cultural work with the teams over the last 12 months, but also focusing very much around recruitment and retention. We want to have good quality staff within our organisation. Like many, staff across HIF have reassessed their situation since COVID, and that's led to some people deciding to retire or move on into different roles. So as a result, we took the decision a while ago to start to look at actively recruiting staff and holding recruitment events, and we've done 3 over the last probably 18 months really, which have been very successful. And we've also attended separate events that have been run by other organisations and had some success at those events as well. It's given us a basis on which we can now build a strong foundation to move the company forward, and it's given us a challenge to see how we can improve services and modernise and also grow services as well going forwards. We're looking at apprenticeships. We very much want to grow our own, and we have signed up recently to an initiative with colleagues in the northeast of England, which will look at how we can probably bring initially apprenticeships into estates, and also potentially looking at something maybe in the future around catering as we get some established staff within those areas as well. As Jordan has said earlier as well, for us, linked to all of that is the health and well-being of our staff, very conscious of what's gone on previously through COVID, and we're very keen that we support our staff in the longer term. So there are some initiatives ongoing that we're linking with the Trust in relation to improving the environment that staff are working in. We have the new restaurant, which offers facilities where people can go both for meetings and at lunch, etc. And it's a very pleasant environment to be in. And also supporting the cost of living initiatives that Jordan mentioned, with HIF providing some support, particularly around the catering end of that work that we're doing. Just moving on. So, what are our other achievements? Well, you will have seen a lot of activity around the hospital in recent times. Not only have we got solar panels and a large crane, which I'm told the charity are doing a campaign of Name the Crane, if anybody is feeling that they'd like to contribute to that. And we're also looking at replacing a number of our windows across the site as well. So a lot of activity and a lot of building. So it still is a hospital, although there is a lot of building work that appears to not in the view on that really going forwards. But we're very committed to working with the Trust to see how this scheme and hopefully I'll come on to in a minute some other monies that we're hoping to acquire will contribute to reducing carbon on the site and enable us to meet our objective to be a net zero organisation by 2040. We're promoting this work and all the other work that we're doing very much around looking at our social media and how that will support HIF getting its name out in the wider community. We also have a newsletter, which I was really pleased to see was on there at the entrance as we came in. And that's given us a lot of publicity for some of the work that we're doing and promoting that going forwards. And my thanks to everybody in relation to contributions to that. One example I'd like to share with you is something that we came across when we were doing some of the culture work with some of our staff. We were asking what was a challenge for them, how they were working, what did they want to change. And something that came forward to us was a comment from a member of staff who was actually dyslexic. And he said that he had some challenges on a day-to-day basis because of his dyslexia. And apart from the fact that it was a great opportunity for us to engage with our staff and very brave of him to actually come forward in an environment that was with other colleagues, that gave us a view of how do we actually support our staff going forwards. And the result of that was we created a reading group. And as an avid reader, I thought this was a fantastic piece of work that was being taken forward by the team. And it gave a number of our staff an opportunity to come together in a relaxed environment to read a book together and take things forward. So not only did that help the individuals concerned, but it also presented us with a fantastic tale from a member of our team who then said, having come to the reading group, that's given me a real incentive about how I might do this going forward. And I now read to my children on a night when they go to bed. So for us, that was just a fantastic bit of work that had come together and gave it great opportunities going forward. So a huge thank you to those that promoted that as well. So those are some of the achievements that we've taken forward through HIF this year. However, we can't get away that there are still a number of challenges. Whilst the company is moving forward, and we are very positive about some of the recruitment that we've achieved in recent months, we recognise that we are competing in sectors that are quite challenging, particularly in catering, hospitality generally, and estates. So we realise that we still have further work to do. We also recognise that we want to make our environment an attractive place for patients, staff and visitors. And whilst we've done a lot of work, as Jordan and others have already alluded to in relation to our capital programme, we recognise that there is still other projects that we want to take forward and have got a number in plan, but as we've said, keeping the lights on and the boilers working can sometimes be a little more challenging in some respects on a day-to-day basis. And it's how we work closely with our stakeholders and partners to explore opportunities for funding going forward in the future. Within catering, we know that there are some new regulations around food and nutrition standards, which both the Trust and HIF will need to engage with, and that's a big focus for us going forwards over the next year. And we'll be working closely with the dietitians and colleagues within HIF to move that forward. A huge piece of work for us, however, and it's not only in relation to HIF, but I would suggest for every single person in this room this evening and on YouTube, etc., is sustainability. And whilst as HIF we are leading this work on behalf of the group, we realise that it's not just in the gift of HIF, but if every single person did one little thing, that would contribute to changes. However, we have a green plan, which we jointly approved earlier this year. It covers a range of areas across the obvious ones around travel, electrics, bikes, electric points, all of those sort of things, but some other areas that perhaps aren't quite so obvious in relation to some of the areas around how we provide our care for patients, do we use the digital agenda more effectively, how do we provide food going forwards, using it that more sustainably. So that's a huge piece of work that we are leading on and taking forward. We're also submitting a further bid for funding to support sustainability on the site, and if we were successful in that, that would enable us to meet our carbon reductions earlier than anticipated within the Green Plan. So, in summary, it's going to be busy. We've got some good teams now growing, some good staff to lead some of this work, but we need to keep up the momentum and to attract more people to come and work within HIF and to publicise it as a good employer and attractive place to work. We do, however, need to modernise some of our services so we are more efficient and more productive, and we need to take forward a programme within catering around improving our standards and nutrition. We also need to roll out our green plan and be more sustainable as an organisation, working with staff and stakeholders and also you, the public. So there is a lot going on. It's exciting times ahead, but I'd just like to summarise by saying that having been involved in HIF now for over a year, I'd personally like to thank all the staff for all their hard work and their support and their dedication, and to just say that they are vital members of Team HDFT. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie and Mark. So, that is everything from us in terms of our input. Hopefully that stimulated lots of thoughts, comments, questions. So it's now our opportunity to be able to hear from you. Now, I know I said right at the beginning, do make some notes as we go along, so this is the time to look back at those notes. And whilst you do that, we do have very helpfully 2 questions that have come in already. So that gives you the opportunity to think about this a little more whilst we go through these. We will need to be near a microphone if we are asking and answering questions, and I can see colleagues are ready to sprint around the room to do that. So please make sure that if you are going to ask something, you wait until you've got a microphone to do that. So our first question is from John Topping, and he asks, what progress have you made to obtain the status as a veteran-aware NHS trust? And Jonathan, can I come to you, please?
Yep, thanks, Sarah. And just want to say, Matt Graham, who's our executive lead for Armed Forces, unfortunately can't be here, but I have to say he has led and done a huge amount of work over the last 12 months. So just in terms of summarising some of the things that we've done over the last 12 months in particular, we have now submitted the documentation for accreditation at the end of November, and we hope to hear back soon. We've recently signed the Armed Forces Covenant as well, and we've got the Silver Award for the Employer Recognition Scheme as well as a trust. And we've now formed an Armed Forces Champions Network as well. And as part of that, we've kind of we've done a directory of services for organisations which support veterans as well. So we also link in with some of the resettlement organisations. So we have successfully employed people through this route, and we actively engage both through HDFT and in HIF as well in terms of recruiting people from the armed forces when they want to find a career and pursue a career outside of that. I've also developed some links with the Foundation College here in Harrogate as well, and with local armed forces units. So there's an awful lot going on. I probably haven't done it justice, and I'm sure Matt would have said it a huge amount as well, but we are absolutely supportive of being very, very veteran aware, and we look to progress this going forward, and we'll get the accreditation and the kind of the kite marks at some point, I'm sure, but I think the kind of psychology and the culture of doing that is already part of the organisation at the moment. Hope that helps, Sarah, but obviously if there's further detail, Matt's got a lot of detail behind all of that as well.
Brilliant, thank you. Really important question, so thank you for that. Our second question is from Lucy Petit. What is the board's current position on digital projects to improve staff efficiencies and collaborative working? For example, task management, virtual wards, remote diagnostics within secure networks. And Jackie, I'm looking at you.
The mic is moving towards me, so I probably touched on this a little bit when I was talking about digital, but essentially all of the above. But we're at a stage where obviously we're going to enter into procurement, hopefully for a new electronic patient record, and it's a little bit of a misnomer because many of the electronic patient records are actually digital management systems with many other things included. So I think the short answer is once we know what electronic patient record we're having, we'll know how many of those things can be built in, which again would be fantastic to have one system that does everything. But yes, everything on the list there is actively being discussed at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I hope that gave you some time to think. I know microphones can seem a little scary, but we are a friendly bunch, I promise. So if you would like to share something, please do raise your hand and colleagues will get the microphone to you as quickly as possible. Oh, thank you. The microphone is coming your way. When it arrives, if you wouldn't mind saying who you are, that would be wonderful.
My name's Doug Masterton. It's a simple question, probably the one that you may be dreading. Will the Trust be affected by the planned strikes by nurses and ambulance workers?
That is indeed a really important question. Jonathan?
Thanks, Doug, and lovely to see you. In terms of the industrial action, I'm sure people are very aware that nationally the Royal College of Nursing went out to ballot its members, and some organisations that threshold was met. HDFT was one such organisation, so we were an organisation where the RCN did get the mandate for strike action. You'll probably also be aware through kind of public news that the RCN has picked and chosen the organisations which it will take strike action in the first instance, and we are not one of those. So on the 15th and 20th of December, we won't be directly affected, obviously, by the strike action from the RCN. Clearly, there is still a mandate, and if the industrial action goes into the new year, that may come to Harrogate. In terms of other health workers, Unison have recently announced the results of their ballot as well, and HDFT as an organisation, what they did not get the mandate to take industrial action here at HDFT, but they did in the ambulance services. So the Yorkshire Ambulance Service, which obviously covers our area, will be affected by industrial action, and I think that takes place on the 20th of December as well. So we will be affected by Yorkshire Ambulance Services. We might be affected in the future. We have got plans in place to manage that, so clearly emergency care is protected, so if there is a strike that affects Harrogate in the future, we will have plans, and we are talking constructively with the unions about how we organise ourselves to make sure that we protect protect services, particularly obviously the urgent care services, which we don't really want any disruption to. But we are working well with the trade unions on that, Doug.
Difficult times, though. I think we have another colleague on at that table who, there we go, has got the microphone. Please do say hello.
My name is Alan Lunn. One of my questions was answered already.
Oh.
But just on a general point, I'd like to congratulate the Trust for keeping such a positive approach to our health. How difficult is it working with a more negative national picture of pressure and so forth?
Very good point. Jonathan, would you like to take
Sarah.
that?
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for the question, and thank you for your comments as well. I think what's really important for an organisation, for us, is to think about what we can do rather than what we can't do, and I think that makes a huge difference. So we provide care to lots of people every day, to people that rely on us, to people often who are very vulnerable, and we always need to recognise that actually what we do is so valuable. So whilst there might be challenges, whether it's staffing challenges or financial challenges or COVID challenges or whatever it might be, there is always something that we can do to make that better, and there are always services that we will continue to provide. And yes, we need to recognise that there are difficulties, but there are always things that we can do better. In terms of the national the kind of national negativity, I suppose, I think to be fair, some of that negativity is because some of the pressure that the health service and the care services are under at the moment, and obviously in terms of the recovery from COVID, some of the concerns from colleagues who work in the service in terms of the burnout and the morale goes down. I think that just makes it even more important for us as a leadership team and as an organisation to remain positive, because as I said, kindness and those sort of things, if you could prescribe it, you would prescribe it, because the evidence suggests you get much better outcomes for patients. We want to be a great place to work because we've got a valuable job to do. So tricky answer actually, Alan, in terms of that, but certainly we will maintain our positive outlook all the way through.
Thank you. Microphone is on its way behind you.
Hi everybody, I'm Mark Oldfield, Chairman of Harrogate Hospital Radio. This is probably a question for Jackie, you might be able to answer this. You mentioned digital records, so in 2018 when Hospedia was removed from the Trust, my team get a lot of comments from patients about entertainment, and as you know that we as an organisation within the Trust provide radios to patients and staff within HDFT. We've provided over 200 FM and Wi-Fi radios to different departments in the Trust, and it was mentioned back in 2018 that Wi-Fi Spark was going to be replaced by Hospedia, and we've never really heard anything more about that. Can you give us an update on Wi-Fi Spark? You talked about digital records. Is that where Wi-Fi Spark actually comes in, Jackie?
Thanks, Mark, and once again, thanks for all you do. You offer such an incredible service. The feedback you get is just amazing. I can't give you the details here and now about Wi-Fi. The EPR will not be related to the Wi-Fi directly. We have had a number of conversations about our Wi-Fi networks over the years, and I know we remain challenged with providing it across the piece in the HDH site. So why don't we take them on offline, and I'll find out where we are with the Wi-Fi networks, particularly for the patients. It is so important, and as you rightly said, during COVID, of course, when communication was limited. So I'll take that one away and get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Any other comments, questions, things that people would like to share? Brilliant, thank you. Microphone is just arriving.
My name's Alan Lunn. What was the motivation to create HIF?
Shall I start? Or do you want, yeah. Mark can start.
Right, I'll start with that. It was a number of things. I mean, it was largely it was about the some of the challenges that the organisation faced at the time. Bear in mind, this predates me, so Jonathan will put me straight if any of this was slightly different. In the sorts of areas of work that HIF covers, it can be really, really difficult to get quality staff using conventional terms and conditions to come and work in some of those roles. Also, I think that, so HIF has a flexibility to do things slightly differently, which is, doesn't necessarily equate to, paying higher salaries, but it equates to a flexibility that you can go with a market rate. Also, there is a whole piece around creating a focus on the sort of work that HIF does, which didn't really exist in the previous environment. So, I'm able to stand here, as is Angie, and talk about, our focus on the kind of staff that are there and the role they play. Perhaps and make that be a reality in life that is not something that was there in the past. And I suppose the third thing is that it created an opportunity for us to look at whether there were other opportunities to provide services, within our community but outside of the trust, which HIF could provide. And we do a little bit of that. Our aspirations are to grow that a little bit. The reality is we've had quite a few things to fix internally, particularly around that people agenda, which is what we've been focusing on. But that's the other reason that we're here. Anything?
Perfect. I wrote exactly the same three things down, Mark. Raise the profile, recruitment, and business development. So, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. Anything else? Brilliant. Thank you very much. Microphone is coming your way. And if you'd like to say hello, that would be fantastic.
Hello, I'm an ex-governor, Jane Headley. I should just like to congratulate HDFT. It isn't a question, but recently it's come to my notice that you had 5 weeks of placement of Leeds University medical students, and I didn't realise until then that you were teaching people, and I know that they had a very satisfactory time. A 5 weeks placement with you, looking after the elderly, which I thought they'd come to the right place. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. That is lovely to hear. Thank you. Anything else? Okay. I don't want to deprive you of the opportunity, but I don't want to keep you sat here if that's everything that everybody wants to share. If you suddenly think of something the moment that we say, right, the meeting is now closed, we are here. And if you then think of something once you've got home or next week, we are here. For our audience that isn't in the room, and you want to tell us something or ask us something, we are here. We're determined to find more opportunities to be able to do things like this because it is really important to hear from you. So do say, I knew by saying that I would buy us some more time. So the microphone is going to come your way, I think. Yep, there it is. Brilliant, thank you.
John Edwards. Could you tell us some details about COVID and how it's affecting the performance in the hospital currently?
Jonathan?
I'll start. In terms of currently, we have, I think, today about 10 or 12 patients that are in our hospital beds who have got COVID. They're not there because they've got COVID. They have COVID and they would be in the hospital anyway. So that has come up a little bit in the last week or two. In terms of we had about 3 or 4 a week or two, and then it goes in waves. But certainly, obviously, since the vaccine, we've had a lot more people in hospital who happen to have COVID rather than being in because of COVID, and I think that demonstrates the success of the vaccination program. Clearly, earlier in the year, one of the big issues we had, whilst the impact of COVID was less severe, a lot of our staff had COVID. So we had at one point 250 colleagues that were off work with COVID, and that caused as much of a problem in terms of service delivery as actually the people that had COVID in the hospital. So the big issue for us then was around the numbers of staff absences that we experienced due to them having COVID. So we had a wave in the earlier autumn. That's dropped now. There is an anticipation that it will come back up again after Christmas, but we'll wait to see.
Okay, thank you. Just double checking there isn't anything else. So as I've said, if there is something that comes up, we are here, and we will be staying for a little while if you would like to talk to us too. Can I finish by saying thank you again for making the time to come this evening and for being able to listen to what we've been up to and to engage with us in this way. There is a lot to share that has been going on. That lovely comment that we had about maintaining the positivity, I think we work really hard to recognise that we are in incredibly challenging times, but our focus about what we can do, how we can keep improving, how we can keep focused on that is absolutely so important to us. And it feels like we've been able to spread some of that this evening. But going forward, we need you to help us with this. So your ideas, your thoughts, your input, your engagement is absolutely essential to us. It was mentioned earlier about our previous Medicine for Members type events, and we're really keen to re-establish those in 2023 if that's something that you are interested in. We have a pharmacy colleague who is very keen to be able to deliver a session on this about all things happening in pharmacy. So if they're the kinds of things you might be interested in, or if there are others, we absolutely want to hear. You've seen tonight from our room experience and our digital experience that we have embraced technology. So you don't need to be in the room to engage with us as such, but we will be able to do a mixture of events where you can be in the room and you could be at home or in another location. But it's up to you to help us shape that and to tell us what is best for you, what most interests you. So finally, thank you again for being here. Thank you, colleagues, as well, for being here. We really appreciate this time that we have spent together. I do believe there's still more tea, coffee and cake if you are in the room, so please do enjoy that before you go home. And to our people who've been viewing this from other locations, thank you for taking the time to join us this evening. So thank you very much indeed, everyone, and this is the close of the annual members meeting. Thank you.